Welcome to WOW, the Woman of the Week podcast series by Pharma Voice. This episode was made possible by a generous sponsorship from Signet Health. For more information, visit signethealth.com. In this episode, Taryn Grome, editor of Pharma Voice magazine, meets with Catherine Ivy, founder and board president, the Ben and Catherine Ivy Foundation.
Catherine, welcome to the Pharma Voice WOW podcast program.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
We're delighted to have you. Catherine, your story around founding the foundation is very personal. Would you mind sharing your story with our audience?
Oh, sure. Well, it was in 2005. I was living in Palo Alto, California, and very happily married, and life was moving along. And my husband and I were actually hiking on vacation, and his thumb went numb. And we assumed it was no big deal, get it checked out when we get home. We were flying home. It happened again, but at that time he felt like his tongue was losing movement, like he couldn't control it. It was an odd sensation. And so we came home, and they thought it was probably a pinched nerve. You know, there was an MRI opening in 6 weeks, but there actually was a cancellation the next day. So we took it just to get it done with, and it ended up being a brain tumor. And my husband could have been the poster boy for Whole Foods, very dedicated to his health. And 3 days after finding out it was a brain tumor, he had surgery. And the surgeon walked out and said it was glioblastoma, which is advanced brain cancer. It's the fastest growing deadly cancer there is. About 20,000 people get it in the U.S. a year, adults. So Ben had the surgery, and then he took the medication, and 6 weeks from that day of surgery, 6 weeks after that, he just overnight could not walk, eat, or write. He basically became paralyzed. And because of the pressure on his brain from the tumor, even though it was removed, it was coming back and there was brain swelling. And he actually gained some of his movement back, but his quality of life was not good, and he passed away 4 months after surgery. So it was out of nowhere, very fast, and a lot of suffering. So a very painful situation. I didn't even know how to spell glioblastoma. I have a sister who's a nurse who helped me with that, but I worked in business, and I read headlines and thought, oh, they're making great strides in cancer. And they are, but there's many types of cancer, and there's basically been one drug for brain cancer in the last 30 years, and it adds about a month to your life. So this diagnosis became part of our lives very quickly.
Very quickly, I think, are the optimal words. Within 6 months, you had gone through diagnosis, treatment, surgery, and then your husband passed away.
It was actually 4 months.
4 months.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Well, for the people diagnosed with brain cancer, advanced stage 4, 98% of people survive 16 months. That's the average. And so Ben was on the shorter side of that, but his quality of life was so compromised that, in the big picture, it was a blessing that he didn't have to continue on like that. And, now we are in the end of 2019, and there are more options now, thank goodness. The life expectancy prediction has not changed, unfortunately, and that's what I'm working very hard on trying to change. But there are more treatment options that can help people.
It's an incredible story. And during that time, in that 4 months, did you ever think that you would be able to catch your breath again? It just, from one thing to the next thing to the next thing.
It was a very surreal experience for me. With this just highly aggressive cancer, and it affects a person's brain, and Ben was so sick. I remember first the amount of stress of waking up and you don't know if your husband's going to be alive in the evening. That was extremely difficult. And I went through a period of time, especially at the end, it's like, this is the hardest day of my life. And then the next day would be harder. And somehow I survived it, and I didn't think I was going to. But it was when your worst nightmare happens and there's nothing you can do to stop it, really rocked everything in my life. And so, it's been 14 years, and now I focus on, how lucky I was to have such a great partner, but it was just too short. But I'm just so grateful that he was part of my life for 11 years.
Well, I will say that's looking at it from a glass half full now in perspective. So let's talk about where this horrific event has led you. And you said that there are more options available. And you are working with the endowed Ivy Brain Tumor Center at the Barrow Neurological Institute. Talk to me about the work that the Institute is doing to address brain cancer.
Well, Ben and I had decided years before that if anything happened to him, we wanted to do a foundation. And so when he was sick, it became very clear the purpose of that foundation. So almost immediately, we created a nonprofit with the intent to try and contribute to find a cure to brain cancer. So I've been doing this 14 years. We are not an enormous foundation, but we are the largest private funder of brain cancer in the United States and actually the world. And so we have funded, our foundation is funded all over the United States and in other countries, and we've been doing it a while. And I have funded every type of science, where it's a vaccine or stem cell, and with great, hardworking, very smart people. And, nothing has changed. And this year, actually this fall, we will have invested over $100 million, and there hasn't been a change. Now, if someone put $100 million into an investment and had a zero rate of return, there would be some concerns. And I saw this was happening. We had the best and the brightest. It was so frustrating. And in 2012, I was like, well, maybe, I just can't figure this out. This is not working. I'm so frustrated. I was getting very discouraged. And I actually went to Jordan and worked in a Syrian refugee camp as a volunteer. And that really reignited my energy of I do have a choice to try and influence something, and I'm going to go for it. And then I came back, and this presentation from Barrow was sent to my office. And Barrow actually is in my backyard, which is what really helps. But they do more brain surgery than anyone in the United States. And that brain tumor tissue is the golden egg of research. And so in 2013, we started something called a Phase 0 clinical trial. And it's something that has never been done in brain cancer. And basically, the day before tumor is removed, a patient's given a microdose of a drug that matches their tumor. And so the next day during surgery, the surgeon can determine if the medicine got through the blood-brain barrier and if it hit the cancer target. And if so, you continue on that drug cocktail. And if it didn't work, you've lost nothing. Because right now, with brain cancer, there's some new options I had mentioned. There's vaccine, there's immunotherapy. You can wear an electric field cap, but none of those have really shown progress. But when you choose one of those therapies, you're guessing. You have no idea if it'll work. And then you wait 2 to 3 or 4 months to see, is this immunotherapy working? Well, if it's not, that tumor's growing. And if you have an average of 16 months to live, 4 months is a huge deal. So with this phase 0, you choose the best thing that matches your tumor genetically, and you've lost nothing, but you could have gained great information. And so we started this real slowly in 2013. It's worked really well, and about a year and a half ago, we decided we're going to really scale this. And so we've invested a substantial amount of money, and we've been very thrilled with the results. It's going to take some time, but we will see patterns of which drug cocktails are working based on matching these tumors. Eventually, patterns will emerge, and so that's. I'm still funding other places, but the majority focus is on this Ivy Brain Tumor Center, which does only phase 0 clinical trials, and they're the only one in the U.S. at this point doing it for brain tumors.
The science is fascinating, and why do you think that the institute you're involved with is the only one doing this type of research? Is it because it's so experimental, or is it so expensive, or where and why is your organization the only one or the largest one doing any kind of brain research at this point?
I think economics. Well, there are two things. Economics. If in order for this to make sense economically, you need volume, and Barrow has the volume of 1,300 brain tumor surgeries a year. So in economies of scale, that makes a big difference. Mm-hmm. And then the other event that's happened is the genetic sequencing has become more affordable and more precise. That sure. By taking a patient's tumor sample and sequencing, it's become so fast and cheap that, okay, so this is what this tumor looks like. We can match the drugs. So it's been those two main things.
And how many phase 0 patients have you had so far?
Just over 200. And we started a year ago, June. So,
do you have any metrics to support the science?
We do. With some of the drug companies, some of that is still confidential. So that would be a question that we'd have to ask Dr. Sinai or the people at the center. But we have published based on one of the clinical trials we have published, and there has been media attention for that, but there's a lot more in the pipeline. And so the thing is, it's so fast, and it's still extremely high quality, but we need answers fast. I'm so tired of waiting. These patients need it fast. And this process answers that. And, it's been interesting because at least 4 other institutions have said, well, we thought about doing that 15 years ago, but went in a different direction. But, the other thing that plays into this is our foundation committed to $50 million to this center. It's by far the largest grant we've done. But the thing that I requested, and they were so accommodating, which was unusual, is they don't take any intellectual property. take the money off the table and we're only going to focus on a cure.
Wow,
so
that is unusual.
It is highly unusual in this country. But this is and so what that brings is for a phase 0 clinical trial, you can try any drug. You can try any immunotherapy. You can try anything. We don't care. We just want a cure. So it really, those contracts for intellectual property can take years. And so to the credit of Dr. Sinai, he was like, fine, set that aside. This is about the patient, and we need to get this train moving. So that was, I thought, I was looking internationally because no one will give up intellectual property. Not, many institutions,
right.
At least in the U.S. So I thought I was going to have to go to a foreign country. But all the stars aligned on this, and so it's been really exciting. And I am finally very encouraged for the future of patients with brain tumors and brain cancer.
Well, that's amazing, and we'll keep our fingers crossed and continue to watch what happens at the Institute, because you're right, if this provides benefits beyond 14 months of average life, the results could be remarkable. And really, it's exciting stuff. So congratulations.
Thank you. It's finally, it feels really good that things are going in the right direction. And so I hope it stays on that track. But I'm encouraged. It's nice when you know your money is really causing change and positive
Absolutely.
change. So very grateful.
Starting a foundation couldn't have been easy. What are some of the barriers that you had to overcome to really get it up and running, and how do you raise awareness around the foundation and the work that you're doing?
Well, we're a little unique in that we don't raise funds. My husband had a real estate company, and I sold that, and I used the funds from that. So I have a finite budget, which also is motivates me to get this done. So we do not fundraise, which is unusual, and I'm grateful because then we can be fast and we can be aggressive and kind of fill in what the NIH cannot do. I'm learning all the time with the foundation, and I went in cold and have had, it's a very steep learning curve. I've made all the mistakes, but after 14 years, I feel more comfortable. I was a financial planner previously. I did that for over 20 years, and so my mindset is saving money. It doesn't have to shift to give it away, but I run it very lean. I don't, and there's nothing wrong with conferences and bringing people together. It's a family foundation. It's my style of this money is for research. It's not for a bunch of airline tickets and hotels. I just want to very focused on changing the research. And so, and when I first started the foundation, a lot of people very passionately would say, oh, if you give us a lot of money, we'll find a cure. And you cannot buy a cure. It just doesn't work that way. And so, like any business, time reveals who walks their talk, and you learn more and become more fluent in the science. So, I've learned a lot, and I'm continuing to learn as I go.
Do you ever think you'll get to a point where you would start to do some fundraising? You did say that you had finite, right? The well is only so deep, but the research is so promising. So do you ever envision a time where the foundation would be not family and you would go out to generate additional funds?
I'm not at that point yet, one day at a time, but not in the near future. I think, it's very, to me, and maybe I don't know how other foundations feel. I think it's extremely difficult to give away money productively. It's real easy to give away money. But I'm very milestone and accountability driven, and it takes time to do really get into the details so that signs can be productive. And the IRS mandates that I give away 5% a year. So that's always a tough balance because I've got to get the money out the door, but that I want it to be, I wish they would do it on a 5-year average so that, if
right.
you have this great project, but it's going to take an extra 6 months, that would be so helpful, but it is what it is. And so, but at the foreseeable future, no, I don't. I'm really focused on the next 10 years will be fine and going down this path that we've started. I feel we're moving towards first base. I want to go for the home run.
That's excellent. Well, it's very inspiring what you're doing. You said there was a learning curve for you, but so tell me about how serving on the board of a number of other related associations helped you. You served as a member of the Mayo Clinic Arizona Leadership Council. You were a board member of the Transatlantic Genomics Research Institute and the Philanthropy Workshop. And you've served on a number of other boards. So how does that help you guide the foundation? And how did that help you develop the skills you need to run the organization?
A lot of those organizations have great leaders. So the two things I get from being on boards, and I don't like to be on too many boards because then I have no time, but
right.
is watching their leadership. I learned so much learning from others, and I really benefit from that. So watching what they're doing, learning from their mistakes, learning from their successes. And then the other thing that really helps me being on other foundations is I can get a little in the trees, and when I take a step back on these boards, it forces me to look at the forest, a bigger picture, and that really helps me with my own foundation because I get so deep in the details. I have to take a step back, and being on those boards, when I contribute to their perspective, I have to look from the forest. And so it helps me then translate that to my own foundation.
You take a very unique approach. You mentioned earlier about taking a journey to Syria and volunteering to give yourself some perspective. And then you use your time on these boards to give yourself perspective. I don't know that everyone does that. What is it about your makeup that makes you take those steps back and really think about what your mission is to go forward?
Well, my husband worked for 30 years to create this nest egg for this foundation. He works so hard that I feel that it's my fiduciary responsibility to be really smart about the money and make the most of it. And so those strategies really help me do a better job, my job better, and so that's why I do them. But Ben works so hard, and, this is the most aggressive, deadly cancer. I mean, it affects people of all ages. When you get diagnosed and there's there's not really anything, and, people die so quickly, this has to change, and I think it can. It's just staying focused and persistent, something has to shift. I do things to support myself, because I don't want to burn out either, which can easily happen. And so,
sure, it could very easily happen.
Yeah, and so those activities help me. So I try different things, and that's what works. So.
Yeah, and it's unusual. Not everybody would take that approach. So, again, I think what you're doing is amazing and it's inspiring. And it is, drug discovery, drug development, especially with a disease that is so catastrophic and so fast-moving, can be very defeating. And you could really lose, as you say, you could lose perspective, but you could also become very depressed about the fact that there hasn't been significant strides. since you started this. So
Oh, yeah.
I feel that you're encouraged by what's going on at the Barrow Institute and finding Dr. Sinai. Did I pronounce his name correctly? How
Yes.
did you two connect? How did that relationship develop?
10 plus years ago, I heard about his work and how talented he was. And so I asked to meet him. And he was reorganizing a tissue bank. And then we stayed in touch, and he'd share his ideas. He's lost two relatives, close relatives, to glioblastoma. And he knows. But Nodder is unusual, and it's hard to articulate. He's obviously very gifted, as they all are intellectually, but he's got his priorities straight, and he just makes it happen. And his communication, he's able to take complex things and communicate very clearly. And so I think he's going to make a change. I just do. Some things you can't describe. So.
Right. Well, it brings me to my final question, and this is our WOW podcast. And is there anything that you can identify from your journey over the last 14-plus years that you could categorize as a WOW moment as part of this, this life journey that you're on now?
People are not surviving this disease, and so I've got death in my life a lot, which is not fun. Because I've got a big heart and I get attached to people. It's just awful to watch. But I was at a unrelated to brain cancer conference in Seattle. And I've had this happen 2 or 3 times. And somehow a gentleman found out I was there. I wasn't speaking or anything, and he walked up to me with his wife, and he was emotional and said, the clinical trial that you funded has saved my life. And then explained, how he was able to see one of his kids get married. That's very moving. I've had a mother write me a letter how her son is still alive because of actually phase 0 clinical trial done a few years ago. When I had a woman who flew into where was I? I was at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, and she flew in from Chicago to bring me flowers because her life had been extended from a clinical trial we did. Those things really fill me up, but the wow, the big wow in the last few years is when I was in Syria, and in a refugee camp, when you see 80,000 people have zero control, zero freedom of choice. And no, I can't control brain cancer, whether I can cure that or not, but I can control me trying. And so that was a major, okay, I've got to keep going, and I'm not going to give up.
I can't does, and as the science progresses, I hope you'll stay in touch with me so that we can report out on the positive impact you're having on the lives of so many people. It's amazing work you're doing, and thank you so much for being part of our program.
Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of WOW, the Woman of the Week podcast series. And thanks again to Signet Health for sponsoring this episode. For more information, visit signethealth.com. And don't forget to check out our other episodes at pharmavoice.com/wow. This 2020 program is copyrighted by PharmaLinks LLC.